the 18th century and to the 19th century. Kumasi remained an entrepot, so to speak, where different ideas radiated. As a matter of fact, the formation, the founding of Kumasi out of Kwaman, where the Asante Constitution was fully firmed up, gives us a very clear impression about the fact that the Asante Hene and Kwame Frimpong Anoche, Okomfo Anoche, and the eminent chiefs who resided in their specific social and political jurisdiction agreed to that constitution which brought about an Asante Union. An idea that was alien to the European, because the European assumed that the Asante Union came about only through war, and assumed that the Asante Union could be compared to that, for example, of the European kings or monarchs who might have had their territories or spheres through dint of war. As a matter of fact, this constitution, I dare say, and challenge the discussion, ran prior to the Magna Carta. In that respect, its authority was so binding in the sacred stool, the Sikibia. That spirituality is that which was also missing in the minds of the European in many respects. Asante from Kumasi was interested in diplomacy. And so before even war, there will be diplomatic engagements, there will be discussions, there will be emissaries, and this subsisted since the time of Osei Tutu the first Asante Hene. So the critical question therefore is to ask, why didn't the British annex Asante after 1874? Just to jump into other discussions. What had changed on the side of the British? By 1800, I know the chair is looking at me, I have more time. The 19th century began with, the reign of, Osei Tutu Kwame Isibe. And we understand that there were a lot of interesting dynamics in terms of diplomacy. In fact, his peaceful relations between the British is well documented. In fact, Kumasi in this period received 3 European missions, which included individuals like William Hyde Copper in 1816. Then we have Frederick James, Thomas Edward Bowditch, William Hutchinson, and Henry Tegley in 1817, and Joseph Dupuy, Francis Collins, Benjamin Salmon, and David Mills Graves in 1820. So Kumasi was the heart of diplomacy in the territory referred to as Asante and the broader enclaves that it covered. So that is just one example which suffices it right. Now these diplomatic missions had one goal: to negotiate for peace, to ensure that there was sometimes an uneasy truce between themselves and their neighbors, including the British. So 19th century diplomacy in Kumasi took a rather different form, nature, and approach over a period of time. It was associated with the changing political scene, especially with the growing influence of Europeans at the coast. So diplomacy, which is effectively known in a modern sense, which requires that you have a representation in a territory negotiating for peace among other social, economic, and political dynamics, subsisted within Asante. In fact, from about the 1760s onwards, Kumasi had brought conquest, and received rent from Christiansborg Castle from the Dutch. But beyond this period, we see that the space between the 1800s, there was negotiations, and also there were ideas of war and diplomacy which subsisted. And some of these, reports have been perfectly written and documented by the good professor of erudition, McCaskey. Now, the peaceful relations between Asante and the British in the first 2 decades of the century took a different turn. What happened? Why did it take a different turn? Why would Kumasi go to war? We know about Asante interest in Dutch holding at Elmina. We also understand that the interest of the British was to ensure that Asante control or influence, or better still, hegemony, at the coastal regions will be dealt with once and for all. I mean, the question is interesting. Why 1874? Why post-1874? And why did the British not annex Asante in 1874? Now, if you look at the account of Ward and Kimberley and the others who have written extensively on that, including Professor Mataski himself, whom I referred to, it's critical to note that it was an expeditious mission. The team with Wesley arrived in the territory referred to as a colony by January, the end of January. Came as far as to Asante by the 31st of January. By the 6th of January, mission accomplished. They returned through Fomena, where I come from, signed. I mean, the treaty was not signed. It was a treaty he would even leave because he would not sign. The story that I found therein has already been shared by Professor Mataski. Now, you understand that it was an expeditious mission. They returned hurriedly, and it did not suggest to us that they were there to stay. Secondly, the terms of the agreement itself, or the truce itself, or the treaty itself, also suggest a very interesting thing, because it did not tell us that the British wanted to have an emissary or a resident commissioner in Kumasi, and for that matter, Asante. Now, this notwithstanding, I mean, you see a disputation, especially when the Dubuan writes in a later period and argues that the British were interested in supporting Asante. That is why he argues that they will support Adansi breakaway, they will support the Gabon country, and all the other countries that were emerging within the state. In fact, if you shift towards Kimball's argument, there is a suggestion that the British had a certain vacillatory approach. They will not get into Kumasi and make any intervention, but they will not also come to fight Asante, even if Asante was plundering itself. In many respects, it is this civil war which persisted in Asante, plus the challenging leadership of Kakari, among other things, that will lead to the depletion of Asante's resources. Two, you would also find that with the depletion of the resources of Asante, the Asante constitution, which they were held together, the social contract, which by Asante constitution allowed the state to use a subtle coercion to get members of the state to go to war, had waned. Leadership challenge with Kakari, the one who followed after him, and also an internecine war, a civil war, which had eaten into the treasury of Asante. In many respects, some have argued that is what will cause Prempeh the First to capitulate. In many respects, I agree in Tutu with my professor with great erudition that through the tact of diplomacy, Prempeh the First would have to save his people from war, because post-1874 and another war just at 1896 would have been too damning and too dangerous for the health and the power of Asante, especially holding it from Kumasi. I will try to just wrap up. I have 1 minute. So, what is my last take on this movement? You would appreciate that by 1900, the British had come to town again. They were successful at that because the rallying call for people to come to fight did not have that kind of zest. And that is written by Mataski. Asante will regroup, but we see that even when Asante had been defeated, by 1905, Resident Commissioner Fuller had taken over to behave as if he was an Asante Hene. And even when the real Asante Hene had returned, he made him Kumasi Hene, a creation by the British. The intrigues by the outsiders is what Asante has sought to cure and has found a balancing act to sustain the union till now. I rest my case. Thank you.
Nanom, keynote speaker, Professor Thomas McCaskey, honorable ministers, clergy, Professor Emmanuel Achampong, esteemed and distinguished scholar of Asante history, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great reverence and gratitude that we gather here today to commemorate the indomitable spirit and unwavering dedication of the people of Asante, who played a pivotal role during the British and Ashanti War of 1874, popularly referred to as the Sagrenti War. As we delve into the annals of history, we also uncover stories of courage, of compassion, and sacrifice that resonate with the Asante nation. My role in this symposium is to discuss the missionary factor in the Sagrenti War. Many scholars such as Eduwaini, Tom McCaskey, Emmanuel Champon, Samuel Obi, Archbishop Sapon, Rastri, Abel Wicks, and many more have handled this very subject with some level of excellence. I stand on their works to discuss the interests of the Basel missionaries in the war. In the words of Njoko, the colonial enterprise and the Christian missionary enterprise together constitute two of the most important historical events that have, for good or bad, considerably shaped the history of Africa, including Ghana. Both defining events occurred almost simultaneously. The colonial enterprise focused on the economic and political dimensions of life in Africa, redrawing the boundaries, reshaping its political arrangements and structure, and considerably looking at different orientations and vital institutions. The missionary enterprise impacted heavily on the religious and cultural landscape of Africa and considerably tinkered with its dominant worldview and value system. A critical revisiting of these two major events, either separately or as twin events, is crucial and indeed unavoidable for our understanding of the British Ashanti War of 1874, popularly referred to as the Sagrenti War. Ashanti and Britain fought several wars. Those battles were called several names, such as the Battle of Nsawankor in 1824, Akatamanso in 1826, Sagrenti in 1874, and the Yrs Of Sagrenti War of 1900 and 1901. Prior to the Sagrenti War, Asante had established itself as a powerful political entity with a strong religious and cultural infrastructure. In spite of its greatness, it still fought more wars. The frequency with which Ashanti battled with her neighbors, including Denjira, Fanti, Bono, Ebe, Gan, Gonja, Tagomba, and many more, will have drawn attention to itself by several observers, especially the British and some missionaries. British administrators seem to have arrived at the conclusion that Asante indeed was a threat to their colonial project. Historians have indicated that some of the wars that were fought between Britain and Asante were in relation to the breach of peace and agreement, and that of 1874 was not an exception. It was born out of the desire to ensure that Asante obeys the peace agreement that it had signed in 1863, not to fight the Southern states, and also to end enslavement of people. Achampong, Abel Wicks, Tutu, Lewin, and several others have indicated that the Asante-British War of 1874 had a kind of crushing military defeat on Asante. Asante got demoralized, and of course, the foundation of its very state was shaken. Indeed, the awesome military technology of the British that was deployed was referred to more or less as a total war. Total war because it characterized the sound that was actually coming from the weapons and rapport that were handled by the British. But the question is that if the Sagrenti War was a matter between Britain and British forces and Asante, what triggered the interest of Basel missionaries in the war, a people that were supposed to spread the gospel? To answer this question, we recast our minds to events in early 1868 and again in 1869, when the kingdom of Anglo and Akwamu around the lower Volta declared war on the Ebe of Krepi. In the ensuing war, Asante soldiers sacked Krepi towns, including Sokode, Enum, Ho, and took along with them missionaries, including Ramsey and his people, Johannes, Kuhn, Smith, Richard, and Pam, Ramsey's maid. We might begin to wonder why an internal war could lead to the capture of missionaries. One needs to understand actions and events of this nature from the complex relationship that had developed between society, church, and the state. The Christian church in the Gold Coast at that time was lumped with other European agencies such as governments and trading firms. The church could hardly be considered by the people in the Gold Coast as an agency with a separate existence. Such was the obvious conclusion to be drawn from missionaries accompanying soldiers on their campaigns and soldiers accompanying missionaries on their mission journeys. There are perfect examples, for example, of Greece, who was accompanied by a soldier up to a propon from the Danish fort. There's also evidence of free man going to Kumasi accompanied by military officers. As already noted, the first 5 weeks of captivity of Ranzia and his group saw the captives marching at the daily pace of about 30 miles as they journeyed from Krepi towards Kumasi. This was difficult for European captives who had to walk in the scorching heat from the blazing sun and burning houses. In the process, Ramsey's baby had a fever and Kuhn a deep wound on his heel from heavy chains. Ramsey's son or child died before the captives got to Kumasi in 1870. Their hope of gaining freedom once they got into Kumasi, as they expected, was yet to be realized. The detention dragged on for more than 4 years. In captivity, Ramsey's wife gave birth to a second child. Attempts were made to release the hostages. David Asante of the Basel Mission, in his letter to the captives, highlighted aspects of ransoming operations that had taken place. And I quote, "Twice have we sent messengers to the Ashanti camp offering money for your release, but in vain. I have been sent to Begro on the frontier of Achim to try and come into communication with you as up to the present. We have only heard of reports from you. I give the bearer a pencil, paper, and scissors that you may write or send some of your hair as an assurance that you are still alive in Kumasi." With lack of success on the part of the Basel Christian Mission, the British colonial administration for Gold Coast, who now had responsibility for Krepi, took charge to secure the release of the captives. One of the first decisions taken was Britain to take possession of Asante captives on the Gold Coast, including Bofo. Bofo's nephew, whom British officers retrieved from Provo in 1869. The plot, it seemed, was to swap captives for the Europeans in Kumasi. Hence, in June 1870, the British governor of Cape Coast, John Popo Hansen, released and sent to Kumasi a batch of Asante prisoners seized in a previous Asante war around Achim, with a promise to free more of Asante captives upon the release of missionaries. That was also not successful. At another time, he sent Asante Hine a gold embroidered silk worth about £100. That also did not help matters. Instead, the demand was for 100 ounces of gold, or about £1,440 for each captive that was being held in Kumasi. To fast forward to 1872, Karkare sent the captives to Fomena, south of Asante on the River Pra. And the message to the British administrator was that 1,000 should be paid to Asante agents in Tekos per captive so as to seal off the deal. A week later, the captives reached Fomena, but before leaving Kumasi, the missionaries had redeemed their 2 African helpers, that is Palmer and his wife Coco, by paying 6 premiums drawn on the Basel mission account. As the European captives journeyed to the coast, a British force headed in the opposite direction of the Asante army. The 2 armies clashed in 1874. The British forces seized the captives and led them as free men to Tekos. It is important to highlight at this stage that the missionary factor played a very significant role in the 1874 war. The capture of the missionaries and the ensuing negotiations allowed the British to plan both in terms of personnel and logistics to be able to launch an attack. Also, the frequent correspondences and spy work and the movement of missionaries such as David Asante enabled enough intelligence report to be gathered on Asante and his forces. Apart from this direct contribution to the war, there were equally important insights that are worthy of note as far as the involvement of missionaries is concerned. The support of missionaries for the war was simply to provide them with a clear form and a direct or indirect way for stability and order in the missionary enterprise in Asante. Since the frequent wars between Asante and the people of the coast proved to be unduly disruptive and even explosive for missionary work. It became evident that after the war, some missionaries, such as Ramsey, had some guaranteed territory for them to be able to carry out their conversion works. The interest of missionaries in the war was also due to the intimate relationship between the formal end of the transatlantic slave trade and the beginning of the Christian missionary enterprise in the Gold Coast.
His Royal Highness Otumfuo Osei Tutu II, Nanano, the Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Academics and staff of KNUST, MPs and Ministers of State, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
My dear Prof, we are an institution of learning, higher learning, and today gives us the opportunity to learn our culture at its best. Let's start it all over again with His Royal Majesty.
His Royal Majesty, Nana Otumfuo Osei Tutu II, Nanano, the Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Academics and staff of KNUST, the MPs and Ministers of State, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's an honor to stand before you this morning to give my thoughts on war and diplomacy, especially from the perspective of women. There is an Akan proverb which says that Oba Totua Etrebe Made. In 1874, an Elmina-born British envoy, Henry Blanche, made provocative threats to the Asantehene, Kofi Kakari and the chiefs during the discussion of the British takeover of all Dutch concessions, including the Elmina Castle. Obviously irritated by this, the Asantehene Efiakobi retorted, "I am only a woman, but I would fight the governor with my left hand." These two statements mentioned above provokes an inquiry into an understanding of the place of women in Asante state military structure. How do we reconcile the Asante proverb mentioned with the above statement made by Nana Efiakoli? What specific roles did women play in the Asante military setup? In which ways did religious and cultural beliefs hinder women from full participation in state war machinery? The 18th century were times of state union, expansion, consolidation for the Asante, and a constant feature which facilitated this process was war. Asante embarked on wars for political, economic, and ideological purposes. Analyzing the etymology of Asante, linguists equate the name Asante with war. Yrs Of Sagrenti, a known historian, gives two traditions to this effect. The first states that Asante emanates from the name Esan, which simply means war. So it is Otumfuo is the corrupted form of Otumfuo. The second tradition also states that Asante was a vassal of Dedra, and Asante used to supply Dedra with red clay, which was known as Esan, used for building of houses. The people became known as Otumfuo, which was corrupted to become Otumfuo. It is essential to iterate here, especially joining into the conversation of Edu, who states that war essentially elevated men over women. After the Battle of Yrs, Nana Osei Tutu the first divided the states politically into different military duties. There was the Adontin, Trafo, Benkum, Nifa, Chidon, Jase, and the Ankobia. All these positions were occupied by men. Though theoretically, the Ohima, that is the co-ruler of the Ohene, could serve as the head of state in the absence of the king. I am then moving on to look at women in the founding of Asante. It is important to highlight the role played by the female ancestresses in the founding of Asante. The Oyoko tradition indicates that Anchiwenyame and her people descended from the sky near Esiakwa in Achimebuakwa. There is also another tradition which indicates that they descended near Asante Manso. Similar traditions are given by other matric lands, including Nyankopon Bueshia for the Bretu, Aso Bode for the Asuna, Amena Jata for the Asenie, and Sena Fontom for the Ebiana. This explains the matrilineal system and why the genealogical descent is traced through the female line. At the core of the socio-political organization was the Abusuan, headed by the Abusuan Penny and the Oba Penny. The Ohene and Ohima at the highest level of state organization played complementary roles in leadership. The political status was conferred by the Ohima, who also served as the royal genealogist to determine the legitimacy of claims made to any vacant stool. And this accounts for the account proverb, Obana Owo Ohene. We are moving on then to look at women and war. Women played crucial roles in war politics in Asante. Nevertheless, their roles are largely ignored and underrated due to Asante's religio-cultural beliefs attached to war and gender. It is important to emphasize that childbearing women did not engage in frontline warfare, not because of their physical inadequacies, but because of the fear of menstrual contamination. Menstruation inhibited women's political progression because of the cultural beliefs attached to it. Though menstrual blood was considered a source of fertility, menstruating women were considered ceremonially unclean. They could not attend social activities in the community, participate in religious ceremonies, honoring their ancestors, visit the chief's court, or associate with any male government official. Menopausal women, however, were free from these menstrual taboos, enabling them to take part in ritual, social, and political activities. For an Asante menopausal woman, it was significant because it meant a shift from the normal life to become a respectable elder, Oba Penny. Old women acquired elderly privileges such as the right to cut their hair, the dancing crime, wear their clothes in the male fashion, drink liquor, pour libation, and engage in frontline war. Despite these limitations, women played crucial roles in war in Asante. One of the crucial roles seen is the ritual known as the Mugume. This was a spiritual warfare in which premenopausal and menopausal women performed daily ritual chants, ritual dancing, mimes, and other spiritual performances to enhance the victory of the military in war until the troops returned. These women sometimes pounded empty mortars with pistols as a form of spiritual torture to Asante's enemies. Women also played female captains and the Asafotrema, who were a type of a rear guard. They provided military support services in times such as scouts, carriers, cooks, and provided war logistics. Women provided useful intelligence on strategies and troops of the enemy states. I go ahead to highlight the contribution of three Asante Hema who played very key roles in the history of Asante. These are Efiakobi, Yecha, and then Yasantua. Efiakobi's skill in war and diplomacy is seen in her administrative tact, boldness in the era of crisis in Asante. She was also known as a pacifist and a great woman of great shrewdness, who projected the unification of Asante above the love for war. On 20th November 1873, at the gathering of the Asante man in Shiemu, she noted to have said, "From olden times, it has been seen that God fights for Asante if the war is a just one. This one is unjust. I am old now. I lived before Kwebupia, and I have now placed my son on the Asante throne. I do not wish for our ancestors to say my son was the cause of the disturbance of the 60 towns." The council of the military generals superseded hers, leading to the 1874 Sagrenti War with the British, in which Asante was defeated. Nana Kofi Kakari's lack of tact, acumen, and indecision eventually cost him the throne. When Efiakobi found one of Kofi Kakari's wives wearing the gold ornament used to bury the deceased Queen Mother, she initiated his deposition, and in his place, Mensa Bonsu was appointed as the Asante Hene. So this ties in with what Professor Makaski said earlier, that when he was enthroned, he misused state resources. In this instance, it can be said that she sought to project her self-interest above in the choice of rulers, because for the second time she put her own son on the throne. To secure the election of her younger son, Mensa Bonsu, as the next Asante Hene, Nana Efiakobi forged alliances with powerful chiefs, including Bantima Hene Nana Wua II and Kokofu Hene Nana Yaobeko. Nevertheless, her own daughter, Yecha, overthrew and exiled her together with her son, Kakari, in 1884. Efiakobi is remembered for her dedication to maintaining the ascension of her lineage in Asante. I move on then to look at Yecha. Yecha became the greatest rival of Efiakobi as she ousted her own mother in 1884. She was known to be a ruthless ruler. She secured the arrest of Kakari in 1884 and ordered his execution. Over 200 Kakari's kindred were also annihilated in the process, though eventually he was spared. Unfortunately, Kwekudria II reigned for only 44 days. After his death, Yecha fought for the stool for her son, Prempe I. Supporters of her opponents, that is, Atrebuana, such as Butuakwa, Ochiame, Jobin, and Samahine Echampon, were all executed in the process. This led to a prolonged war of 4 years, Within the period, she assumed the role as a rival ruler of Asante and took possession of the golden stool so that no opponent could be enthroned. In Asante norms and value systems, the accumulation of wealth played a key role in power struggle. Yechan was a wealthy trader who used her money to finance the ambitions of her children. As a known wealthy woman, Yechan deployed her resources liberally. It was known that she bought loyalty using land. She also acquired a large supply of Sniper rifles and ammunition to aid her self-ambition. As a result, she was given the title Oba Berima. Yechan remained resolutely opposed to British diplomatic missions, including Griffin, Hodgson, and Maxwell. This explains why she was targeted for exile together with Prempeh I and other prominent chiefs in 1896. She died in Seychelles on 2nd September 1917 at the age of 77. I move on to the last heroine in terms of Asante history, that is Yrs Santua. Yrs Santua was a formidable-looking woman who had the slogan, "Men are not pillows for any woman to lean against." Yrs Santua played a pivotal role in galvanizing the Asante into action by challenging male impotency in a time of national crisis. A champion and Obey emphasized that her devotion to the golden stool, determination and courage contributed to making the war against the British. When her grandson, Nana Kwesi Afrani the Jesuhene, was exiled, together with Prempeh I by the British, she openly challenged the demands made by Sir Frederick Hodgson for the golden stool. Her devotion for the golden stool and determination contributed to the siege and guerrilla war from April to November 1900. This contributed to her famous statement, "How can a proud and brave people like the Asante sit back and look whilst the white men took away the king and the chiefs and humiliated them with a demand for the golden stool? The golden stool only means money to the white man. They have searched and dug everywhere for it. I shall not pay one prejan to the governor. If you, the chiefs of Asante, are going to behave like cowards and not fight, you should exchange your loincloths for my undergarments." For the sake of time, I'll move on to my conclusion. Within the broader framework of gender and power relations in Asante, women are highly recognized for their roles played in the continuity of their lineages. Because of the matrilineal structure of the Asante people, which centers on the idea that a woman passes her blood to her offspring, this bestows on women recognized political rights. Several queen mothers did not limit their responsibilities to women and domestic affairs, but played crucial roles to enhance national sovereignty. These queen mothers defied gender stereotyping to shape Asante social and political institutions and prove the capability of women despite the religio-cultural ascribed biological limitations as compared to men. In conclusion, while women served limited roles in Asante army due to customary disqualifications and the fear of menstrual taboos, upon reaching menopause, they assumed war politics together with men. As we celebrate the 150 years since the Sagrenti War occurred, it is important that we remember heroines of history, including Efia Kobi, Yrs Echan, and Yrs Santua. I guess I will lastly play the devil's advocate here in probing the unsung stories of women. I wonder what the story would have been if these women had told their own stories. Had Yrs Santua or Yrs Echan been lettered or Western schooled, And had they similar avenues as Nana Ajiman Krempe I while in exile, what stories would they have written about women in war? This leaves much to be desired. And I'll end by saying that as women, he bestows on us to go ahead
and the British and the Asante signed the Anglo-Asante Peace Treaty of 1831 at Cape Coast Castle. This treaty empowered the British to create the British protected territories on the lands across the River Trap. By 1872, the Danes and the Dutch had sold all their trading forts and castles to the British and left. These lands became protected from any Asante control or encroachment. The British protected territories of the southern states, including Asin, Wasa, Fante, Denfra, Akomu, Ga, Adangbe, and many others supported the British, serving as their informants. As so European power on the coast, the British fomented another war against the Asantes. And this is how it all began.
Yura, Nancy, Yeshia, no yeti, a high, Adaroma, Sabibu Holma, my you. What you have got to them now, Mania? You need not Dani, Timothy, and all my 80s are.
My Mama Francis. I'm not the last one. I was in there. And I go there. When you have a see Sarah, when I say, Araba, we travel from Nessa. Now, what can you do? I'm not going to.
Arote, I make control. Sabi, Samo, and I'm moving here. Yet, you put your hand here. I go to my car, I want to pass up. I didn't tell you myself, I tell you.
Mura, Boto, we need that. I'm going or want the one. Ah, what's that? I want to go bossy. To be new man. What? What? We do Papa. We do. Who put the computer? I go.
Hey, no. But moves are possible. Papa be in it. Dabi, I am me coffee kakabi. I took you on the baby. Messi among.
want to discuss official matters with you.
All right, let them come in. Omra. Pass on here. My lord, the kings from the coastal areas. Come and welcome. And I'm not see Ozzy or Mark.
Yeah, right.
I say so. Also, some panel.
I'm not a catch.
What?
So, you put on a bonnet. What? Me are chimney. Me so I am Fantini, and one also said danger. But one month ago, a canano young to be mechanic. Yet also, yet some titties are bacon. Ye hear the set. I'm an adult. Yahoo said, oh, I've been packed at the Maya and my own piano. Label, young beer. One walk as Antibam train for Libby. And woman near them, Papa. I did not yet. I'm not a woman. Yes, let her say, or the way I buy a quadia. Some yes, you have a target. Not yes, for the beer. But I will make another must money.
I'm not a catcher. You're going to another year to say. I asked him before. Yeah, the gun of the eye, I said, but who's my son? Pia, you're going to get a child. The other night, I didn't hear you. So we're home. It was that the phone to be here. You're not going to just ask me. I don't know to it. I just say, oh, my body. It's slow.
My lord, what we are saying is simple. That they want to be your informant. And also, they will give you any secret, anything about the scientists. In return, they seek for your protection. Wonderful! They are seeking for permission to leave.
Please, I thank them for coming and get them some refreshments.
Yes, my lord. Also, hey, madam. You are charming.
It's a
Good guy. If I therefore the career, and I my power. Get us to do. The man to get from the career. Then I myself. And I'm a top. I'm a papa. Anything. I must have it's unfair. And my head. Just try to take part and say. It was just the devil. I didn't get it. What was that afraid? Then in the million so. But I did. You are the career. And I am a friend. No matter you.
yeah. The same said Safa Saget Najasi on another possible.
Achami.
Maso Canada to Pana. Sada bibi fatanwa. Aya kono. Nenya se dase. Nana no, si ewra na kamen ko ye. Me se, yen ka to atwa bese. Yen ka to.
Bi na kiere ho. Jewu, no. Chegou a bodia. Vem na saída. É bem dizer. Sabe o nhão não acabou. Vamos ver esse chão. A coisa brodi, olha a menina que está no chão. Você tem biblia sé. Nana não vai se pegar. A do man como a dia che, levante. A dia sete vai. Ele não é nem a praia, mas o ele tem que me ligar a dizer. É muito bom. É muito bom.
Yrs Sagrenti. Adaroma. Ma poko tochi. Ana masole. Obatie amana ko se. Akwasi brodi ya lasa ko chukoko. Na security ene ni apria. Ama yewla. Onya bi bolo iwulu dia. Me ma poko tochi. Ohia kumara na anene. So ma ko ya. Kwasi brodi. Sabi mani se so ba bi humo na twetwe ya wo sapa ho mentre ho anya ko fofroto ama ko tibo ko so ko du ama tue na pete so ba ko ya ma tere ma sa tse aja ko togo ama mo se ya sa tse ya office ni o ko awia ya fe o so bese kaka me kan se biwa adaroma so ba mo ko ya Akambe, what's it? Brody Coco, a charity, and a better. Someone welcome. You're a champion. Madame, she managed to Yura, and I say, Adamo, so you can say, about it, your way. In your boutique, you won't assume. Say, Yaswas and the Queen. Madame, and yes, you have today. Adama afọ berema fo ekase Adama entumira entuna ahema mame mena na mo di ka kasa ye ni nyina ya ge ko ho ne ho bon